Welcome, everybody. This is Corbett. I am 52, and with me,
Is Lucy, daughter of Corbett, and I am 22 years old.
you sound like you're a fantasy character there.
I
Daughter
try.
of Corbett. For Lucy, you missed out the first 30 years of my life, so this podcast is what you missed when you didn't exist. And this week, we're talking about the Cola Wars, probably the bloodiest war in American history. Well, maybe
Oh
not,
my
but
goodness.
that might be an overstatement. I could be wrong there.
It could be the most manipulative,
It is
maybe.
definitely up with the most manipulative for sure. In case anybody doesn't know this, there are sodas. you
Yes.
can you can get sodas, pop, Coke, whatever you want to call it, fizzarangs. There's got to
What?
be a whole list of names for everybody in the country calls them something.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
soda, essentially, a soda drink. It was originally all created by pharmacists like over 100 years ago. And of course, the first one was Coca-Cola, the brand. The second one made was Pepsi. And the two of them have really been kind of one-upping each other over the years. I think in the 20s, Pepsi went under. I don't know if it was because of the bank collapse, the stock market crash in the end of the 20s,
Hmm.
or if it was something else. But they came back and they were doing the same thing. In the 60s, Pepsi sponsored, I think, either one of the World's Fairs or one of the Olympics in Russia. And there was a
Oh.
big deal where one of the Russian leaders is walking around with a cup that says Pepsi. And that was kind of the big push for Pepsi back then. But that's not what we're really talking about, because essentially that was the cold cola war. Now we're getting to the hot cola war. Because in, I think, 74, 75, Pepsi issued a challenge and threw down the gauntlet. They straight up started saying, like, hey, try our drink against this other drink. And it's kind of a thing you aren't allowed to do to physically say, our thing is better than their thing on a commercial. And this allowed them to say, our brand is better than this other brand, even though it's really, really, really obvious who the other brand is. And I think that broke a lot of marketing at the time, because then McDonald's could start pointing the finger at Burger King and vice versa. Basically, they were like, "Oh, if we tell them who they are, then it's good advertising for both of us." So yeah, sure, put us in all your advertising. The Pepsi challenge was, I think it started at a festival, like a ski festival, but it went nationwide. I think it worldwide actually, where they would put the two drinks behind something to hide it. So basically, you couldn't see which one was Coke and which one was Pepsi, because ultimately they look like the same caramelized drink when you set them out there.
Yeah.
And Pepsi supposedly got the most votes. I don't really know if that's true, because really you can say anything you want if you're the one running it. But Pepsi is sweeter, and that's always been true. Pepsi has a lot more sugar in it, whereas Coke has more caffeine, I think.
Yeah.
And originally, more cocaine. So there was that. Really got you going in the morning.
Yeah, got a pep in your step. See, that would have been a good slogan for Pepsi.
Yeah, see, we pep in your step.
Yeah.
We put straight up drugs in. You'll need a prescription.
Oh
But,
god.
they'll probably market that at some point, I'm sure.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway, but the Pepsi challenge was the open throne gauntlet that they were going to war. And that was the bit. And they countered, Coke actually countered by exploiting the Pepsi challenge with Bill Cosby. All through my childhood, Bill Cosby pops up and like, that is so weird. I remember it at the time, but he was spying on the Pepsi challenge and like, oh well, they're not drinking the real American. That was the thing. It was the American drink, and because Pepsi was promoting themselves at the time with big American flags and red, white, and blue on their label, so they were the American drink. But Coke said they were the American drink. So, well, and to be fair, in the 50s or they did all those Norman Rockwell pictures or Norman Rockwell type pictures of the Santa with the Coke and kids with
Yeah.
Cokes. They kind of put themselves into Americana at the time. And Pepsi was the choice of a new generation. That was literally their slogan when the 80s came around. The new generation drinks Pepsi. All these old people drink Coke. And the funny thing is, my grandfather drank RC Cola, which was Dr. Pepper was its own brand, and the company was very well done. But RC Cola was their Coke knockoff, their Pepsi Coke knockoff, and I thought it was okay. But Dr. Pepper, of course, was their flagship soda. Everybody could drink Dr. Pepper. Not everybody cared about Coke or Pepsi that much.
Mm.
At least in the South, very common.
Dr. Pepper was common in the South?
Dr. Pepper's crazy common in the South.
Oh. I feel like Pepsi's more common in the South,
No, I mean
but
you'll
I don't
find
know.
Pepsi and Coke, and that's the one thing that kind of came out of this war. We'll talk about that later, but they really saturated the market with soda and changed from glass bottles, which were recycled. This is the funny thing to me too. Everybody talks about recycling now, and like in the 70s, we always recycled. You'd go get a glass bottle, you take it back, they'd wash it, clean it, remarket it, and put it back out with the soda. Bam. Then they switched to aluminum cans because aluminum could be recycled, and they were closer to like soup cans compared to the way they are now. Because now they're like a molded aluminum that isn't 100% recyclable, I think.
Mhm.
And I could be called on that. It's fine. It's just more of a. Originally, they were very much a round, like flat top and bottom can. I mean, you would look at it and go, oh, it's a soup can with a pull top.
Like a small, the little small
Yeah, it
can
looks like the
baby
small. If the
things?
small ones were 12 ounces, they would look like that.
Oh.
The ones that are what 8 ounces now, I think, or
I don't know. Whatever the people, quote unquote, on a diet drink.
well, people on a diet, the Canadian soda.
How is that Canadian soda?
Because in Canada they don't allow for 20-ounce sodas. It's
Oh,
unhealthy. I don't know if you know this, but drinking as much soda as Americans do is unhealthy.
yeah, that's fair.
I mean, I'm sorry. I really feel bad about it, but at the same time, yeah, if something tastes great, it must be bad for you. And we drink a lot. As Americans, we drink a lot of soda. I'm sorry. You go to, I mean, Big Gulp came out in the 80s, and Big Gulp was the drink like, oh, 44 ounces of fluid. I need that. They made cups so big they wouldn't fit in cup holders. And that was when cup holders were kind of brought about. It's so funny.
But it's perfect for road trips, you're set for the whole trip with the one big gulp.
Yeah, but most people would just drink them and then go get another one 20 minutes later.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. You'd have to pee so much.
I'm sure.
Oh,
I doubt you'd have
man.
any kidneys left, really, but we survived it somehow. Anyway, but that is a good point to bring up. The second real fired shot was Coke. Fired the Diet Coke out because you know what's all this soda is bad for you. Well, hi, hey, guess what? We got a soda that's good for you, kind of, because they used artificial sweeteners and they weren't great. But everybody loved the idea of I can have a soda and it's healthy, like a salad. So Diet Coke became a thing, and of course Diet Pepsi came out not long after that. And I think Coke also put out Tab about the same time. Tab was it had no real calories.
Oh,
That was one of the
okay.
jokes in Back to the Future. In Back to the Future 2, sorry, in Back to the Future 2, or no, 1. Yeah, in Back to the Future 1, he goes back to the 50s and he's like, I want a tab. And he's like, I'll give you a tab as soon as you order something. Like,
Oh.
I want a Diet Coke. What's a Diet Coke or no, a Diet Pepsi or sugar free Pepsi? It's like sugar free. What are you? What's that? Or like I just want something without sugar in it. And he hands me a cup of coffee. But I think Pepsi put out Crystal Pepsi, which everybody still chases down as a relic in eBay. Still, I think it was in the
Oh,
90s. Everybody wanted the healthy soda. The healthy soda. I think they're still chasing it because they made Coke Zero recently.
I mean, kind of recently. That came out like within the last maybe 10 years.
Yeah, but it's been a long, long run fight. The cola wars have kind of gone back and forth with who's making what, who's going with the cheapest thing or the lowest sugar values. They expanded their flavors, they expanded, I don't know, just about everything in this fight. And really, the only casualties that I can think of are the American people. Because I did look this up, and it's a sad sort of state of affairs, but if you don't know this, diabetes is up a lot.
Yeah, it is.
I looked at it. I looked it up from 1980. From 1980, there was 5.5 recorded cases of diabetes in America. 5.5 million. Sorry, 5.5 million people, which isn't that many if you think about how many people are in America. Several hundred
I
million.
mean, yeah.
But and you have to take into account that what was it? Avengers Endgame was the one that brings it to mind because everybody's like, oh, he'll wipe out half of all of everybody. It's like so it'd be like 1974.
Yeah.
4 billion people were on the planet instead of 8. And you have to account that basically our population's doubled. But now in 2021, the last American diabetes numbers were at 24 million
Jeez, that's
recorded. So they
ridiculous.
didn't double, they quadrupled. Actually quintupled, I think. Almost 25. Yeah. So not great. And I guess that takes us to the next part of the show, which is where we are. what what happened? What's the aftermath of the war? What's the future's take on it?
Well, first I gotta ask you, Dad,
Mm.
what's your preference, Coke or Pepsi?
I worked for Coke actually for a couple years. I kind of preferred Coke, but only because my dad preferred Pepsi. I think a lot of it was just me
Oh.
going against the grain. And my dad preferred Pepsi because his dad only preferred RC. I think the important thing here is to always go against what your parents do.
Well, I guess I'm picking the wrong soda then, but at the university I go to, we're sponsored by Pepsi. So
Oh,
whenever we had events and stuff, we always wanted to get root beer floats, but we could only get root beer if it was what, Mug? Mug is owned by Pepsi.
I thought Pepsi owned A&W.
I think that A&W is Coke. Anyways, we could only get the one brand of soda because that's how
RC.
the university
RC owns
works.
A&W.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they're part of the Dr. Pepper brand. That's
Oh,
funny.
yeah.
The
Weird.
Barks is owned by Coca-Cola and Pepsi owns Mug. So there
Mm.
you go.
But it was disappointing because one day we couldn't find root beer, and so we had Pepsi floats, and Pepsi floats are just not nearly as good as a root beer float or even a Coke float. I feel like Coke floats are just better.
You know, that was
But
a pop cultural thing in the 70s from Laverne and Shirley. Laverne always preferred to have her favorite drink was milk and Pepsi, just to take milk and
oh,
Pepsi and pour it together. I
wait,
forgot
when did
about
that
that.
come out?
The 70s. Laverne and Shirley was a spinoff of Happy Days, and Happy Days basically covered from what 72 to I want to say 82, somewhere in there. It was like a 10-year
Oh.
run show.
See, that's funny because everyone was doing that on TikTok recently. They're like, "Look, it's milk and Pepsi. It's this new drink, and it's so delicious." And I'm like, "What?"
Yes, Laverne and Shirley was before TikTok, just
Well,
for timeline reference.
I knew that. I just didn't. That's kind of cool. That's a modern day thing. You know, we have Pepsi. They forget. They call it a name. They like nicknamed it something, and I don't remember what it is. But yeah, Pepsi milk was a thing.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that was a thing. I thought it was like eating Tide Pods or I don't know. You
Well,
kids and your loud
that
music.
also was a thing. So sorry to burst your bubble.
Nah.
America has not improved very much. But
Yeah, I know, I know.
though I will say the kind of like intrusive tactic of saying, "Oh yeah, we're better than this brand." I feel like with the cola wars, I feel like they were more discreet about it
Mm,
just because they're more like, "Oh, the other brand in air quotes," but everyone knows who it is because they're being very obvious about it.
yeah.
But now you've got like the car wars, I guess. Ford is calling out. They're like, "Oh yeah, if you want this better, stronger vehicle, better than a Toyota, get a Ford," like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just explicitly calling each other out, which is interesting just because I feel like people are getting kind of more honest-ish, maybe
I don't
in
know if
marketing.
honest is the right word. Aggressive?
I mean, yeah, but I think trying to avoid being canceled is something that's on cancel culture's a thing, which sucks, but if people don't want to get canceled, they have to be honest and upfront, you know?
Mm, yeah.
Which could still get them canceled, but it's better than someone else coming out with it and then they're like whiplashed.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's kind of interesting. I was surprised that I was like thinking through my mind about Pepsi versus Cola ads,
Mhm.
and Coca-Cola does have sort of that Americana nostalgia feel, which I
Yeah.
think is what draws older people to it because they're like, "Oh, remember the good old days when things were like this?" And I feel like Pepsi's all like, "Yeah, we're America," but the only ad I can think of is that, like, Cardi B ad when she was like, the "Oh, crrr" thing.
I guess I missed that one.
It was her and Ben Stiller, I think, and they were sitting in a booth, and she's like, "Give me my Pepsi, oh, crrr," and I'm like, "Okay." Which that's, like, the only ad I can think of for Pepsi, but it's so funny because 'cause I've been surrounded by Pepsi at school just because that's, like, our branded thing, which I just don't like Pepsi that much, or Mountain Dew, but everyone in Wyoming drinks Mountain Dew, so it's just
I think it's fair to say most college students have always drank Mountain Dew. Even when I was in
Really?
college, Mountain Dew is just
Really?
because it has a ton of caffeine in it.
Ugh, yeah. I just know it as the drink of like, "Oh, I'm a man, I drink Mountain
Well,
Dew."
that's the funny thing. The Mountain Dew was originally marketed as Mountain Dew because of the song. At least I presume this is true. I could be totally making this up, so somebody feel free to call me out on it. But there was a song that Roy Clark put out called Mountain Dew, the good old Mountain Dew. It's a song about moonshiners
Oh.
in the old Kentucky mountains. This is Mountain Dew. It's hard liquor, but this is a soda, a
Mhm.
citrus soda that's basically just sugar in a bottle. You know, it's Mountain Dew. Like, ah, I'm drinking Mountain Dew like my grandpappy. Like, no, you're not. He might be using his Mountain Dew to clean your wounds when you fall down, but
Oh,
no, no, no.
jeez.
You're drinking something else. I think I remember the first soda I ever drank was actually a 7 Up. The first one I
Yeah.
distinctively remember was 7 Up, and it was because I was skewered on a limb, and, it was in kindergarten. They had trimmed the bushes at an angle, and we were climbing on these sort of branches on the bushes because 'cause they're big bushes. They're like, 10 feet tall bushes. Like,
Mhm.
you might call them trees, but they're bushes because they don't have a trunk, it's just a bunch of limbs.
Okay.
But they had trimmed them down and cut them at an angle, so it's like a skewer, and I slipped and, like, it went right up into my armpit, and I was just hanging off of this bush, and, the teachers came and grabbed me and basically stuffed a towel under my arm until my mom would eventually show up about an hour or 2 later. They gave me a 7 Up, and I remember getting the 7 Up, and went, "This is so good. I'm having the best day ever."
Man. Yeah, you gotta have the kid intro drink of Sprite, and then you only have Sprite until you're, like, a teenager, and then you can have your Pepsi or Coke, your adult drink.
Nice about the adult drink. I don't know. My dad always had Pepsi, and I didn't mind Pepsi. I mean, they're really the same. One's a little sweeter, one's not.
Okay, that does not make them the same. Just saying, but
They're both a caramel-based flavoring and water that's carbonated. They're the same.
Yeah, but Coke has that bite to it. I feel like with Pepsi, it's just there.
Wow. So now the new
Sorry.
generation is Coke?
I think so. Okay, now that I've entered my college phase, I've really enjoyed Dr. Pepper. You just can't go wrong with it. But
Yeah,
that's
Dr. Pepper's
like
an all-around drink, but it's a whole 'nother company. That's the
I
funny thing.
know.
They kinda just stood off the side and like, "Yeah, you guys go to town. People just want Dr. Pepper." And Dr. Pepper kinda hits every mark. It has the caffeine, it has the sugar, and it's kinda like a root beer all on its own.
Yeah, so it's like a nostalgia in itself.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta admit, Dr. Pepper's pretty good. Sorry, Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah, and the Dr. Pepper ads are just way more goofy and fun. I feel
Yeah.
like Coke is very much it only comes out at Christmas, and it's always got, like, Rock and Roll Santa or something. Pepsi throws in some random stuff, but Pepsi kind of throws in more Mountain Dew ads than Pepsi ads, I've noticed.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then, like, the Dr. Pepper ads are just so random that at the end you're like, "What am I watching again?" But I really want a Dr. Pepper. That's all I need.
I will say this, I don't think Pepsi had a very good jingle back in the '70s because I don't remember one. I remember the Coke had the, no, "I'd love to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." It's like a little, like, We Are the World type thing for Coke,
Oh. Mhm.
and it was pretty sweet. I mean, it was a nice, quiet, calm song to make you go like, "Yeah, I wanna have a sugar-powered drink to charge my day." Whereas Dr. Pepper had "I'm a Pepper." And if you
Mm.
ever look it up, it's basically this guy running around in a vest, like, I'm a pepper, you're a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Join one of us, be one of us. No, the lyrics are something different, but basically it's kind of a join the crowd and be with everyone. It's sort of weird, but it's kind of funny and it was catchy. And
Hmm.
those two songs were really memorable. I don't remember because Pepsi just had stars come out and like, hey, I drink Pepsi. Pepsi's great. I'm like, okay, good for you.
Yeah, I feel like that's all I've seen too. So I don't really know how much it's changed. I
Well,
think
they had
it's the same.
like I think Michael Jackson was promoting Pepsi for a long time, and that was a big push in the mid '80s. Was Michael Jackson? Well, Michael Jackson was just huge then anyway, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Eh, well, anyway, so there we are. The Cola Wars have passed, and they're still around, and they're still fighting each other, and we're still the victims.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a victim if we're enjoying it so much, unless
Yeah,
it's some.
that's the hard part. You can't really go. I don't really like soda. Like you liar.
No, there's new changes. There's like mushroom soda now. It's better
What?
for your brain. Yeah. You would hate it. It tastes like kombucha, but
Oh god, you know you're killing me. What is you put junk in your water and then drink it? Come on. Uh,
you started it, dude.
I know, I know. It's a shot heard round the world. It's fine. Anyway, for what you missed when you didn't exist, this has been the Cola War, and I have been Corbett,
I've been Lucy.
and here we are. Now you know.
I do.